When it comes to power systems, a battery monitor is a good baseline for your monitoring so you know what's going on to some degree. And if you think of your battery bank as a fuel tank, we can kind of think of the battery monitor as a fuel gauge to let you know how much fuel you have left in the tank, so to speak. And for the last few years, the SmartShunt has been a great battery monitor. It doesn't have a screen, and it's going to use your phone as the screen in conjunction with the Victron Connect app. It's going to give you a few parameters like the battery state of charge, the battery voltage, how many amps or watts are coming in or out of the battery bank at any given time, as well as how many amp hours you've consumed. And you also have a second parameter there that's your choice. You can monitor the starter battery voltage, the midpoint voltage of the rear battery bank, or you can take the temperature of the battery bank and collect that data as well. Now, if you are happy with just using your phone, that is kind of the minimum setup. Or they have a VE Direct port and you can export that data to a GX device. This is the Chrono GX. They also have the Servo GX, and it's going to bring the battery monitor data on the bottom left of the screen and show you that along with what the rest of your system is doing. And then if you want to go a step beyond that, you can export the data to the VRM portal from Victron. That's the Victron Remote Monitoring and Management Portal. It's going to log your data over time so you can see what your system is doing over a long duration. And you can also control and update your system from anywhere in the world. So that's how far you can take it. As I said, you can keep it simple and just monitor the battery monitor with your phone. Now, one feature that they added that I really liked that came in handy the other day was I ran out of power, ran all the juice out of this battery, and the battery monitor died, and it now will retain its last known state of charge that it had right before it lost power. So it came back on and went right back to the state of charge that it had before it lost power. So very handy. Now, recently, Victron came out with the SmartShunt IP65 model. Let me grab that. So this is the water resistant model, and it came about because a few Victron customers, they were putting their SmartShunt IP21, that's the original model, they were putting it outside with their batteries. And with battery monitors, you want to put it pretty close to the battery bank. And in a lot of vehicles, the batteries are hung underneath, or sometimes they're out on the tongue of the trailer. And you need to put that battery monitor out there with them. And one guy reported that he had it under the vehicle in a relatively dry location, but he was driving down the road, I guess hit a puddle or something like that. A splash of water ended up killing the battery monitor. He replaced it and put it in his own IP67 waterproof enclosure. And so Victron brought the weather resistant model out after that. And this can be put under your vehicle or out on the tongue of the trailer. But I have to say, I typically put the SmartShunt in with the rest of the electrical system. In general, this stuff is not waterproof and it's going to go inside. And I put the battery monitor and the batteries inside there with it. So I'm analyzing for myself whether I need to start adding the weather resistant model to my system designs, or if I could stick with the original SmartShunt, which based on the wiring, I kind of like better, and I'll get into that in just a bit. We'll do a tabletop analysis, and I'm going to show you some nuances and some up-close looks at the wiring and how they differ between the two models. But before we do that, if you're interested in your overall power system, not just your system monitoring, then I have a resource that you may be interested in called the Ultimate Van Power Cheat Sheet. It's got a discussion of the 3 major charging sources in vans and RVs, which are solar, shore, and alternator power. And it's going to talk about how they all have strengths, but they also have weaknesses as well. But when you bring them together in a holistic power strategy, it's going to make sure that you're covered no matter where you go out on the road, so you can enjoy what you went out there to do and you're not going to be worried about your power system. There's also a discussion about different battery types and the strengths and weaknesses of those. That's going to help you narrow in on which battery type is going to be right for your project. And then lastly, there is a really cool diagram that is essentially your entire power system on one page, kind of like you see here. It's going to show the 3 major charging sources at the top and how that power makes its way through the system to charge your battery bank and how it comes out at your end devices such as your microwave or your cell phone. For instance, how does the alternator power make its way through the system and end up coming out and running your microwave? So it's a really cool diagram that's included with the Ultimate Van Power cheat sheet. To grab your own copy, all you have to do is click that link below or go to rosslukman.com/vanpower. So with that, let's go ahead and get our tabletop out here. We're going to zoom in and look a little bit closer at the IP65 versus the original SmartShunt. All right, so let's take a closer look at the IP21 and IP65 SmartShunts. Now, just to give the full story, you can see all the wires over here for the IP65. It has some type of liquid that was poured over its circuit board and seals everything up. It is dust proof and can be hit by water jets. That was the test that it passed to become IP65. The IP21 can take drips of water in a vertical position, but basically indoor and outdoor models there. They are the same price now, so I would choose the one that's going to work the best for your situation. So the IP21 model is going to come with 2 red wires like this. They have little inline fuses, and the first one is going to be for the battery plus. So the negative cable is going to run through these shunts, and that provides the negative side of the circuit, and all you have to do is connect them to battery positive, and that is going to power them up. So this is the positive wire for the IP65. Now the second port is the auxiliary port, and that's the one where you have 3 choices. You can do the starter battery voltage, the midpoint voltage of the rear battery bank, or you can do the temperature sensor, which I'll show you here in just a second. So with the IP21, you're going to have an identical second wire there, and these are going to plug in with ferrules into the front of this device there. And of course, with the IP65, those are just sealed into the circuit board. And one of the things that I like to do is shorten my wires. That's a little bit of my contention with the IP65. I don't like a lot of slop in my wires. And what I like about the IP21 is you have these ferrules, but I can just bring my own ferrules. And I've got a ferrule crimper there. And so I shorten the wires and make them nice and tight and straight in my system. But with the IP65, you can do that. You can see the fuse is close to the end of the wire, but basically you would use butt splices like this. These are the 18 to 22 gauge butt splices, and you could shorten that wire to tighten it up a little bit. But whether you put the ferrule or the butt splices, there are ways to tidy up the wires. But those are the first 2 wires. Now let's talk about the third wire, which is the VE Direct cord. So you can see on the IP21, you've got that VE Direct port there. And then on the IP65, you have the VE Direct cord. And you just have kind of a female socket there. So with either one of these, you would need the VE Direct cord. You can see it has 2 male ends on there. One end goes into the SmartShunt, and the other end is going to go into the Serbo GX. So one of these white ports there, you can see the 3 VE Direct ports. And then on the Ekrano GX, you also have the same 3 ports there at the top. So that's how you would connect it. And the Ekrano and the Serbo will recognize automatically that the SmartShunt has been plugged in, and it's going to pull in that data. Now, one last thing I wanted to mention that I like to use is this temperature sensor. So this is about $30, and the label says it's for the BMV 702 or the 712, but they don't really tell you this, but it can also be used for the SmartShunts. And basically, you have 2 wires here, one of them red, one of them black. So for the IP21 model, you're going to plug the red into the battery positive terminal, and then on the black one, you're going to plug it into the auxiliary. And I like this because we're going to connect it to the battery positive lug, and it's going to provide positive voltage to the machine to turn it on, as well as the temperature. So it's kind of a 2-in-1 device. And then with the IP65 model, it would be a little bit involved. There are instructions on the Victron website, but basically you would take the red and the gray and you would clip these off and use your butt splices to connect to the red and the black wires of the temperature sensor. So hopefully that made sense. Again, they have excellent diagrams. Whether you want to do the temperature sensor, the starter battery voltage, or the midpoint voltage, they have separate diagrams in the Victron manual for the SmartShunt to show you how to wire that. So at this point, let's hop on over to the display and I'm going to show you how to program these. All right, I've got the IP21 SmartShunt back in place, and I wanted to mention a couple of things. So first off, the blinking blue light on the SmartShunt is going to indicate that everything is good and it's putting out the Bluetooth signal. It also has another light I'll show you on the IP65 model. So it's going to have an error light that's typically going to be off, that's going to be red, and then you're going to have the blue light, which is going to indicate that the Bluetooth signal is being put out. So those are the two lights, pretty simple. And I want to mention I put the temperature sensor back on the SmartShunt. Now the other two options, the starter battery voltage may be something that you want to use for your auxiliary input. A lot of people are concerned with their starter battery and they look for ways to charge it from the rear system, from the solar or the shore power. They want to charge up that starter battery. So you may want to have that as your second auxiliary input and bring that into the SmartShunt. On the midpoint voltage, that's your third option. That is going to be for 24 volt or 48 volt battery banks that are made up of little 12 volt batteries. Oftentimes taking the midpoint voltage is going to give you an indication of the health of those batteries and let you know if there's anything wrong in those higher voltage battery banks. Again, if it's made up of 12 volt batteries strung together in series, you can take the midpoint voltage. But I think probably nowadays the starter battery is going to be maybe the number one thing that people want to monitor. So that's just a little bit of opinion on that. As far as the temperature sensor, what you can do is do a wireless VE Smart network, and you can share that temperature with things like a smart solar charge controller, and you can have this charge controller use that temperature to shut down below freezing to not damage lithium batteries. However, Victron has indicated that if your batteries do have a low temperature shutdown, they want you to go ahead and let the battery shut itself down instead of having the charger shut down. So that can be up to interpretation. Maybe you want the chargers to shut down as well as the batteries to be extra safe. But nowadays, the batteries may shut themselves down at low temperatures, and you don't necessarily need to take the temperature sensor unless you want to know the temperature yourself so you know if it's about to shut down, etc. So with that, that's a little bit more detail. Let's go ahead and zoom in here and we'll look at the programming. So let's take a look at the programming. What we're going to do is click this gear icon on the top right. We're going to go into the battery settings. We want to set the battery capacity of the entire battery bank that we're measuring. In my case, that's a 100 amp hour battery. The charged voltage is going to be based on the bulk charging voltage of your battery from your particular manufacturer. So this could be 14.4 or 14.2 with some of the other lithium batteries out there. But 14.5 works well for the lifetime batteries. So this is actually the same voltage that my chargers are set at. So they're going to bulk charge my battery bank up to 14.5, and you want to match that voltage. And this is basically a high point at which point the battery monitor will reset to 100%. We've got a couple of other parameters down here that we have to meet, but when it gets up to this voltage, it's about to reset to 100%. Discharge floor is if you don't want to use the entire battery capacity. Let's say that you want to only run it down to 15%. You can put 15% in here and it will pretend that that is 0, that your batteries are empty at that point, and it's going to adjust its calculations. And in my case, it would pretend that I only have 85 amp hours of capacity. The tail current is basically another condition at which point it will reset to 100%. So 3% in this case is going to be 3 amps. That's 3% of 100 amp hours. So as the batteries get charged up, the current going into them slows down to almost a trickle. It's going to go down, down, down during the absorption phase of the charging. And when it gets below 3 amps, it is about to reset to 100%. We have one more condition to meet. The charged detection time is set at 3 minutes. So when the batteries reach 14.5 volts in this case, the current going into them is 3 amps or less, and that condition stays for 3 minutes or more, the battery monitor is going to reset its state of charge to 100%. So before it does that, it's just going to take an accounting of what comes and goes out of the battery bank through the SmartShunt's shunt. It's going to take that accounting, but every once in a while when these conditions are met and the chargers are getting it all the way to a full charge, it's going to reset the calculations to 100%, or the state of charge to 100%. Next up, we have a couple of numbers here that are based on your battery chemistry. So we have charge efficiency factor and Puchert's exponent. And these are numbers that are pretty typical for lithium batteries. You're going to want to get those from your battery manufacturer. And I'm going to go ahead and jump down here to the battery state of charge on reset, keep state of charge. And I mentioned this at the beginning of the video. Basically, when the battery monitor loses power, do you want it to come back on with the same state of charge that it had? And I'm not really sure why they have this as an option, because I think it's kind of a no-brainer, but I would put in keep state of charge there. You can also just change the state of charge yourself, which I don't really recommend. You kind of want to let the chargers charge up the battery bank and let the machine calibrate itself. So you don't really want to be punching in percentages, but you can if you want to. And I'm going to go ahead and move on from there. You can set up alarms based on high temperature, low temperature, high voltage, low voltage, and low state of charge. So that can be really handy. Also, those alarms will show up on a GX device like a Servo GX, and it will give you an alarm notification on that other device if the alarms are set up on here. So miscellaneous, you can have it used as a battery monitor, and you can also change it to a DC energy meter. So if you wanted to monitor a particular device like a refrigerator and you just wanted to see how many watts that refrigerator was taking, you can actually change the SmartShunt into a DC energy meter. Next up, we have our auxiliary input. So this is one of the 3 inputs that I was talking about. So I have it set because I have the temperature sensor, but this is where you can come in and change it to starter battery or midpoint voltage, or you can just remove that second auxiliary input altogether. We'll leave it on temperature. Temperature coefficient, this is typically based on the capacity that changes based on the temperature of the battery. And with lithium, we have that set at 0, but you can plug in a number and say as the battery gets colder, it's going to lose capacity. That may be more relevant with lead acid batteries. Let us move on. VE Smart Networking. So this is what I mentioned, where it can share its temperature with the solar charge controller. It can also share the current going into the batteries as well as the battery voltage. The closer the measurement is taken to the actual battery bank, the more accurate it's going to be. So if the solar charger is far away and the cable length is maybe 10 feet of cable, the SmartShunt voltage measurement is going to be more accurate, and it can pass that voltage data over to the solar charge controller. So that's the VE Smart Networking. Pretty cool stuff, but I'll go ahead and leave it at that. So that's my comparison of the SmartShunt IP21 with the new SmartShunt IP65, the indoor and outdoor models. I hope that was helpful. My conclusion is, if I'm using it indoors, I'm probably still going to go with the original SmartShunt, and I'm going to get the IP65 version if I have to do something outdoors and I need that weather resistant model. But I also want to mention that I had the 500 amp edition of these shunts in this video. They also have a 1000 amp version and a 2000 amp version of both types. But for my systems, the 500 amp model has always been enough. Basically at 12 volts, that's going to allow up to 6,000 watts in or out of your battery bank. And that is typically plenty for the systems that I build. So I hope that was helpful. Now, if you want more help with your overall power system, be sure to grab a copy of your Ultimate Van Power cheat sheet. Just click that link below or go to rosslukman.com/vanpower. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.